Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Dano Says So. Today's episode has been impeded upon by current events and is going to have me going in an interesting direction to start things off. But before that, I guess I should let you guys know, today's guest is Mark Rainey, somebody I've known for about a dozen years and who I've operated in the same circles as most of my life. Mark is the owner of TKO Records record label and of Cascade record pressing plant in the Pacific Northwest. It's an interesting story. It's a long story. It involves a lot of different cities and a lot of different times in the evolution of this music. Mark Rainey, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
Outstanding. So when you and I were getting ready to do the interview, we would have these texts going back and forth. We'd be like, man, I may need to reschedule. We're in the evacuation path. Basically, I'm living in the apocalypse. Can you tell us about the last week or so?
Oh, yeah. It's been interesting. Just to dispel any hysteria, we've never been in danger of burning up here. Where the plant is, and go ahead.
For non-West Coast folks, give people an idea of exactly where you're at.
I'm talking to you from Milwaukee, Oregon, which is about 10 miles south of Portland.
Okay.
And where I am, and then where I live, we're protected in four directions by rivers. So the likelihood of the fire actually jumping the rivers and getting to where I've been was pretty low. But a lot of people, further south of us and other parts of the state have not been so lucky. It's been, an unprecedented amount of damage. But for us, really, it's just been a matter of, monitoring things and then keeping an eye on the air quality, which is right now wretched. I think the news report I just heard was saying that we are number one of any city, large metropolitan city in the world, poor air quality. So
lucky you.
Yeah.
I worked. I don't want to jump ahead in subject matter, but you remember I worked at Erica for a little while.
I remember you saying something about that. Yeah.
I remember how hot a pressing plant could be. Were you operating at all during the fires?
We shut down operations last Wednesday. So we had about a half a day of trying to run while the air quality was worsening, and it just got to the point where everybody out on the floor was like, "Forget it, man. We can't do this."
I can't imagine doing it.
Yeah, it's in the warmer months. We operate a full, like I'm sure Erica does, a full steam plant. So we've got a boiler in the back room, which is great in the wintertime, but in August it can get kind of brutal. So to put this kind of toxic air quality on top of that, forget it. It's not a viable working environment.
So you're living in your work situation. Were you literally in a situation where you could see and were very familiar with the areas exactly where the fire was, and in relation to where everywhere that you're operating? Were familiar areas burning to the ground?
I know that it at its worst it got about 12 miles to the south of us.
Okay.
And it was starting to go around cities where we know people who live in those areas. But outside of that, I've been in Oregon for 5 years. I love it here, but admittedly, I've been pretty locked in, with getting this business established. I haven't ever had a chance to properly, visit the whole state. So,
you've been other than quite a while, and you're still not assimilated, huh?
I'm assimilated to Portland, but much like Texas. Portland is very different from the rest of Oregon. It's kind of like an Austin, Texas type of situation where you've got a couple different cultures going on.
I haven't been there since the '90s, and I remember that being true then.
Yeah, very much so. Not to say that I don't like the areas outside of Portland. It's some of it's got a really kind of a cool sort of the kind of frontier vibe you get in places like Colorado.
Well, sir,
but there's also some problematic. Say it again.
You're rocking a frontier look, so that'll work.
Yeah. This is I get a lot of comments about my appearance from people who haven't seen me in a while, and I explained to them this all came from punk rock dad was not scaring the teenage boys that were coming by interested in my daughters, but Manson dad. See, punk rock dad got called dude. Manson dad gets called sir. So
people who don't know you don't realize. I mean, I'm 6'1", and you're considerably bigger than I am. I think any model of a Mark Rainey dad would probably scare kids more than you realize.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to make sure I had control of the situation. So, you know, we had this Manson dad look, and then when I got up here, had to clean it up a little bit because Manson dad also can't get bank loans apparently. So, so I had to clean up for a little bit. But no, it's kind of what I'm into now. Yeah.
In my page of Sharpie notes here, I have absolutely nothing written down about Manson dad.
Manson dad.
And with that said, why don't you and I get organized? Because we could BS each other for quite a while at everybody else's expense.
No, for sure.
You've lived in a lot of hotbeds of hardcore and punk rock in the country, with things really starting to pick up for you operationally when you landed out west. But could you kind of give listeners a rundown?
Of TKO?
No, of your geographic history real quick.
Oh,
and then let's jump into TKO as you land in its birthplace.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, see how far back you want to go, but I went to high school in Central Virginia, and then after a few false starts, ended up attempting college in Boston in the early '90s, and you know, I grew up in this punk thing since I was 13 or whatever. So I was, upon arriving in Boston, I mean, I was aware of the legacy there and got plugged into what was going on there at the time. Ended up working shifts, security shifts at the Rat, so that kind of gave me positioned me to observe what was going on in the music scene there pretty well for that time. And then, personal reasons, I ended up out in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And I'd had the idea to start a record label in Boston, but it's just one of those things that it didn't work out. And I guess I wasn't grounded enough and focused enough to really go after it. And arriving in San Francisco, it was sort of, for me anyway, the perfect confluence of all these different factors.
Why don't you share some detail on that?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, we're talking, so yeah, still mid 90s, so 95, 96, I got out there, and, Bay Area is, it's always had stuff going on out there. I mean, it waxes and wanes, but, like LA, like New York, like the centers, there's always something happening there, and I just happened to arrive, right around the time, it was in the wake of, punk breaking mainstream. And of course, there was a big boom that followed that with labels and bands and et cetera, et cetera. But there was also, within that some, a couple points you could point to as sort of pushback against the mainstreaming and the commercialization. And one of the forms that took was this sort of, it was sort of like a return to traditionalist idea of influences. I think best exhibited by a band like the Swinging Utters, for example. And so sort of, so in the Bay Area, in the wake of the Utters and Rancid, you had, for the lack of a better term, what got called the West Coast street punk scene,
which I have made fun of no end, despite the fact, despite the fact that you command a ton of my respect. I love poking at the lingo.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's shorthand for, I mean, street punk is one of the terms that got used before Oi got coined in the UK in the early 80s.
It might be more dignified than Oi.
Yeah, I think it was maybe, for people who weren't necessarily, shackled to the whole baggage of the scad scene, but liked music from that era. It was, kind of a safer way to describe it. For better or for worse.
That was as effectively as I've ever heard it explained. So, if for nothing else, it kicked me in the head.
Well, I mean, if you ask somebody on the from the East Coast, though, it's a totally different set of baggage that comes with it. It's maybe a little bit more image heavy, with like the band like the Casualties, like extreme haircuts, full on battle jackets, all that stuff, which I think is cool too. But you definitely had sort of different uses of the term.
Okay, so that's going on in pushback in reaction to sort of the 92, 94 punk done broke.
Sure, we were looking for something that was like, well, we're not, necessarily like the Lookout or Fat, more pop leaning stuff. It's not rip off records, garage hipsters, which again, I'm not knocking any of that stuff. I like stuff from all those scenes, but you want to sort of we wanted to assert our identity, assert our pocket of the scene and what we were doing. And that's kind of what we ended up hanging our hat on.
I don't know whether you avoid past associations or whether things invariably there's always interscene politics and things. But does my memory serve me right that you worked at Mortem?
I didn't work at Mortem. I worked at briefly at Epicenter, but TKO was distributed by
Mortem. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak over you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but TKO was distributed by Mortem, so I definitely worked with Mortem.
I just remember you and I being able to converse pretty fluently about, having Ruth Schwartz and Tommy Strange type stories and things like that. I think that's where that memory is coming from.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, great. And there's a lot of great folks that work there, and a lot of funny stories. And it's a time I look back on fondly. And it's funny. Ruth kind of prophesized this in talking about labels that ended up leaving for whatever reason. And that TKO actually ended up leaving before the whole Mortem sale and crash. But Mortem definitely did serve to shield labels like us from the cold hard realities of the music business. They very much were kind of babysitting us, and it's kind of one of those things where I think myself and probably a lot of other labels, we didn't realize how good we had it until
interesting
we weren't working with them anymore.
Well, so you've been doing the label roughly 25 years?
Just about, yeah.
That's a lot of space for evolution. What would you say can you break it down into eras, or can you talk about sort of sea changes that really had to affect your business model or your plan of attack?
Oh, for sure. How much time do you have? I mean, it's
well, you can do 30 minutes, but it's not a hard fast rule.
Yeah, as far as the big sea. Well, obviously, as I touched on before, that whole the punk break of the 90, I guess like 93, 94, around there. That created in the underground the interest and all these new people, new fans coming to this kind of music that it allowed for this whole cottage industry of independent labels, and we certainly benefited from that, and benefited from being in the same town and able to connect with one of the premier respectable, legitimately underground distros, which Mortem was, and TKO benefited incredibly from that networking. Past that, my personal life's been obviously interwoven into the course that the label's taken. So after becoming a new father, a couple years in, my wife and I picked up and moved back to Richmond, Virginia, which is my home state. Okay. And looking for a change of pace and wanting things to maybe looking for a little bit more of a calmer, less immediately urban environment.
If nothing else, the population density are two completely different animals, the Bay Area or the city.
Yeah, I can remember crossing. This is kind of telling myself, some of my knucklehead tendencies, but crossing the street with a stroller and trying to kick the cars that were going through the crosswalk while I was, and I was like, this isn't a good look. I can't be starting with people when I'm pushing a stroller. This is ridiculous.
For all of the idealism and all of the beauty and all of the things that I really, really look back on and worship about the Bay Area in the 90s, I dated someone who lived in the Mission, who lived in the old Army Street projects, which are no longer there anymore. But it's the only time in my life that Orange County boy used to carry a knuckle knife in his jacket. There's just busy big cities that 1 in the morning are different animals than anything else.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I can understand a parent leaving the big city, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it was, you couple that with, TKO had kind of run the, I guess you could call the typical cycle of a local tastemaker label, which is you can usually count on 4 years, which is, really? Long enough time for the bar crowd to kind of get in, be into it for a few years, and then people start to cycle out. you know, and again, this is very much a Gen X timeline that I'm talking about. You know, this is pre-millennial, but you know, we did our 4 years. We, you know, the scene got together. We started to have regular shows. We, you know, we built up a local audience, and then, you know, life started happening to people. So it was already starting to kind of spread out. So I spread out to Richmond, Virginia. We were only there a couple years. I was there just a little bit before the whole No Way Records hardcore revival scene kicked off in full. So I wasn't there to benefit that, but I did get to know some of the people who were involved with that later. But 2 years later, we were back in California, and this time we landed in Huntington Beach. And one of the reasons that we picked Orange County was that at the time there was a pretty good concentration of bands I was working with, and I was sort of looking for another base that had that local connection that we had really kind of lost in Richmond, you know.
And you owned the store in Fountain Valley, which is essentially is Huntington Beach when you and I met.
Right. Yeah. So the store opened. I did that around the 10th anniversary of the label. And yeah, if you want to talk about sort of changes in the industry, I mean, that was the time when, you know, the CD was bottoming out, the chain stores were going away. I mean, the whole model that we relied on through the 90s was just out the window. It was gone.
Yeah. Okay.
You didn't have Virgin to sell to anymore. You didn't have Tower. You didn't have the chain stores that, you know, were trying to carry everything under the sun, sort of supporting all the other efforts, like the bands that weren't selling so well, the production of vinyl, et cetera, et cetera. When you took that away.
Was at one point was CD a big part of what you were manufacturing? I mean.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, because
I'm probably 80%.
Enthusiast. Okay, good.
Well, no, I always have been, but I mean, in the beginning, vinyl was really sort of a break-even operation that we were allowed to. It was a luxury afforded to us by the selling of the CDs.
Okay.
And then, you know, come, you know, 2007, 2008, I mean, that wasn't necessarily the case anymore. And, I can't remember if we discussed this before, but I got the idea to open the store for two reasons. Simply, one, I was seeing all the sort of the local stores going away. And yet I was still seeing a demand. I mean, we had, you know, our TKO used to have just a warehouse space in Costa Mesa, no signage, no street profile, nothing, you know, nothing of the sort. And I remember one Christmas we had just a rash of people wandering into our office, hoping we were a record store because they were just looking to buy, you know, Frank Sinatra Christmas.
Yeah, had a TKO tile out front, or
no, not even. I mean, they were just they were finding us on the internet, finding our address, and just, you know, knocking on this door with just a street number on it. You know, no signage whatsoever, hoping we were a record store. And so, you know, between that and, you know, us getting new landlords and our rent getting increasingly closer and closer to actual retail, you know, why don't we just open a store? I mean, we're about to have to pay retail price anyway. So that, you know, that's what led me to you know, to go on that venture. And you know, the way I put it, I guess the long story short is that TKO was a label that opened a store, but very quickly we became a store that happened to have a record label.
I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the label essentially ran behind the divider that was about midway deep in the store.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, you know, more and more the retail operation really kind of helped, you know, make up the cash flow we'd lost from CDs tanking. So, and, you know, and from there it was sort of a period of regrouping, and you know, eventually, you know, I was able to shift back to a vinyl only, you know, vinyl focused operation.
How scary, how deadly, or maybe not so, because that's an outside perception of a guy who can borderline fictionally say he's had a record label from time to time, but obviously it is not what I do in the sense that it is what you do. But how dangerous was digital? And when suddenly you didn't have to hold a piece of physical media?
I mean, I think the danger was less so for a label like us because, you know, it's a specialty thing. We're selling to music enthusiasts. I mean, I know for the majors it was completely deadly because, you know, you looking back at that, I mean, you know, it was the perfect storm. I mean, you had the economy tanking. So the music buying demographic all of a sudden didn't have all that disposable income to spend
buying power.
$17 on a CD or whatever,
That's around the time you and I met. Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that was going on. And then at the same time, the file sharing technology, because it was originally ignored by the retailers and the major labels, it developed independently. And so all of a sudden it became this mechanism where, like, hey, you lost your job or you're not making as much money. No problem. You can still get new music. You can just get it online now.
Well, look, I have kind of a jump ahead question that you just inspired.
Sure.
So in the here and now, with you being a vinyl exclusive label, or being a vinyl focused label, do you not release digital versions of TKO stuff that comes out now? And if so, is that in order to drive or necessitate vinyl sales, or is that not even a necessary consideration?
Yeah, I don't touch digital at all anymore.
Okay.
In some cases, because of the way I do deals now, everything's a licensing deal. So, the understanding I have with the bands is that, I'll do vinyl, but downloads, CDs, all that's your territory. And some of them are pretty diligent about self-releasing it, or they've partnered with labels that will take care of that for them. And I'll certainly facilitate with sharing music and artwork and stuff to help that along. But that's really something I don't touch anymore. One is I'm just happy to be done with it. It's not how I listen to music. It's just not my preferred format. So, I'm happy to just not even have to bother with it anymore.
Manson Dad don't stream.
Yeah, right. No, not at all. But at the same time too, now that I've got this pressing plant in the works too. I do a lot of cross branding there. Like all the TKO releases, all same, manufactured and distributed by Cascade Record Pressing. Put the logo on there, so it's an opportunity there.
There's an obvious pivot there, and before we get there, it sounds like correct me if I'm wrong. We're probably getting close to where we can sort of talk about Cascade. But you mentioned that everything is a licensing deal now. You traffic primarily in reissues these days, right?
Mostly, yeah.
Okay. How did that? What drove you to that? I mean, I understand the safety in it, but I also know. I mean, I know your library, and I know that you release a lot of stuff you just love. The poison idea with what might as well be a picture of you in the center over your shoulder. Yeah. That ain't accidental.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a combination of things that pushed me in that direction. One was when there was that whole sea change with the CD/touring model kind of going away. I've always tried to do the best job I could with the resources we have. And I was starting to question my ability to handle a certain scope of responsibilities under the title of record label. Okay. And
I'll tell you, that's not an obligation every label feels. So good for you.
Well, it's, it just sort of seemed like we were, after a few years of just sort of trying the same old thing and not having it work and just sort of being, befuddled by this new environment we're in. I did take about a year off of releasing anything. And during that time, I was observing the buying habits of, the customers of the record store. And, more and more, it seemed like, working with catalog of an established band that's been around 25, 30 years. I mean, the whole need for advertising or any kind of sales pitch or anything, that just goes out the door. I mean, you just, for a band like Poison Idea, I just say Poison Idea. Right. That's the sales pitch. And you're on board with that and you're like, yeah, we'll take 30, or, right. You don't get it. And maybe you're not my customer, and that's fine. That's, choosing to work with, the handful of bands that I still do that are all kind of fit that profile of having been together, having deep catalogs, having, been releasing music for 30 plus years. I can really get back into what I love the most about records. And that's just the packaging and the presentation and just all the attention to detail of really making a quality presentation of whatever title we're doing or whatever title we're reissuing, And and it was the love of all those things which brought me here in the first place. So I'm having a great time with the label now. It's probably my favorite period.
Two things. I have one, maybe two label questions, and I wanted to discuss something that I don't know whether it was motivated by your geographic change or something else. But the first being, a lot of people don't know, and it's because there are very few of them, and that's the way you and I planned it from the outset. But you did a No for an Answer release, and you did a No for an Answer release, which was a new record. It was in 2009 or 10 or 11. I think it was 2011. Right, and it caught me off guard. It was sort of a spray to all fields move in terms of versus everything else that was on the catalog. But I was honored to have you do it. When you do a record where you do that few copies, we did 500 copies of that 7-inch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that do anything to help the survival of the label, or is that just a passion project?
No, I mean it certainly helped the label, and it definitely helped the label at the time in the context of the label being attached to the store.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of my what I was trying to achieve with the store was, I've always I wanted to have the label that was putting out records I'd want to buy. And I wanted to have the record store that was, like the record stores I grew up going to, that I'd want to shop at, and part of that was just sort of building the cachet and the mystique of that's the store that has the in-store artist appearances, and they release these super limited records by these key bands like the Meatmen, the Flesh Eaters, No for an Answer.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I mean, we benefited greatly from it. I mean, as far as monetarily, I mean, it was definitely Operation Break Even. But again, that's I mean, that definitely came to me. I mean, when we worked on that project together, I mean, that was definitely during a period of sort of reorientating and reinventing for me as far as a label. And it was great. I mean, those are some of my favorite releases. They're a little, again, kind of counterintuitive. Like, why'd you only make 500 of that? I mean, you could have made, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000, who knows?
People will send artists that they're friends with on the social networks these pictures of their collections, and people will send me something that has all the 14, 15, however many records I've done at the time, right? And invariably they'll get to the Workshed stuff, and like something like Voicebox exists as it's a crap record in terms of sales, but it's in like 6 colors or something, right?
Right.
And they'll have all those, and they don't even know there's a third No for an Answer record. So you've got the great sought after secret item. I kind of love it.
Right.
I flash that cover. I flash the cover of the TKO release to people, and it gets a big what the fuck moment.
What is that? Yeah. I like that, because I mean, it's not a release that I think most people who are fans of the label would expect to happen. But I mean, for me, I mean, one of the big influences on TKO was what I learned observing, the original run of Revelation Records, and just the branding and how there was sort of, just the way they presented themselves, which Jordan has told me was inspired in a large part by Danger House.
Really?
Just how it was a sort of cohesive brand, and I mean, as lame as that sounds, from an anti-capitalist myself, but I mean, it's just sort of a label, an underground label, sort of establishing an identity. I mean, that was a huge influence on me. So to get to do, a release from a band who I bought, your original EP when it came out, and it was, part of that original run of the Rev stuff. That was definitely like a bucket list thing for me, for sure.
I was honored. You are no longer connected to the store, and you are also living a couple states away, or hundreds and hundreds of miles away, and you are also into a new venture. You want to give me the quick story there?
Sure. As quick as I can make it.
I want you to fly the Cascade flag high. So
yeah, it's the next. I guess it's the next level in this madness. Okay. Or as I say, what all this other 25 years has been basically training me for this new venture. So, in late 2014, picked up the family, moved to Portland, Oregon, and partnered with a couple people up here to start the Northwest's only automated vinyl pressing plant. There hadn't been one in the area since, I think, the early 80s. Yeah, I guess the motivation behind that was, I mean, besides wanting to move and leave California, which was a whole separate thing. What got us in that direction? Just conversations I had in the year or so leading up, talking to other label people that I knew, and just hearing how difficult it was for them to get vinyl pressed. Sort of in the wake of this whole record store day and this whole comeback. All of a sudden the majors were back in the plants, and these independent DIY labels who are a big chunk of what kept vinyl going through the whole original vinyl downturn.
Right.
Ironically, all of a sudden, couldn't get their foot in the door. And I had been shielded from that because of my personal connection to Pirates Press. So I was getting records made, no problem, because I was getting preferential treatment from old friends who were well positioned. Right. But a lot of my colleagues didn't have that benefit. And so just in conversations with Adam Gonzalez, who's an old friend of mine, I knew him from bands and zines that he ran on the East Coast. But he was now in Portland working as a vinyl mastering engineer, operating a lathe and doing cuts for vinyl masters. He and I would have these late night conversations, and finally one time I was like, man, did you ever think about starting a plant and up there? He's like, yeah, I think about it all the time, but yeah, I don't know how I'd get the money. And I asked him how much money he thought it would take, and he threw out a very naively low sum. And in my bravado, I was like, oh yeah, I acted like I had it in my back pocket. I can raise that, no problem. And so that started this sort of game of chicken that he and I had, that eventually led to moving up here, purchasing some vintage equipment from New Jersey by way of Canada.
As one does,
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's after looking in Jamaica, Africa, literally a worldwide search. Just having all these things sort of come together in a really kind of insane way. I mean, I still can't believe that any of this worked, because it really shouldn't have.
It sounds like a Herculean endeavor. I know a little bit more behind the curtain about record pressing plants than some, not as an artist, but as a working the midnight shift, sweating my ass off, actually pressing records. And I imagine, I actually found the atmosphere terrifying and exhausting. So the idea that you would say, hey, I want to make one of those, makes me think you're a crazy person, and I should be glad you live so far away.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. No, it's like I said, anybody with any sense would stay far away. But there's some of us who just, this is what we do, this is what we love, and my great skill is in coming up with ideas and getting other people with talent to get excited about these ideas,
So give me some drill down. Tell me, number of machines in a good year, how much you're getting done, how fast is it growing? Has pandemic been dangerous to it? Just, share with us the true story of manifesting your passion up there.
Well, I mean, it's just, it's been crazy. The landscape in the 5 years that I've been actively, running a vinyl pressing operation, the landscape has come nowhere near to settling at all.
Yeah.
All these different conditions and good and bad things popping up. I mean, it's it's been crazy, but I love it. I mean, I probably never worked this hard in my life, and I've never been, as professionally fulfilled. I mean, it's
nice.
Like I said, I mean, I really do feel I'm really quite fortunate. And I feel like I've spent, again, better part of the last 20 years training for this. I mean, as far as the details, so right now we are in possession of, 7 machines.
Okay.
6 of them are running. So that's 5 lines, 4 lines dedicated to standard weight vinyl, 1 line dedicated to 180 gram vinyl, and then the newest machine, which is a dual cavity 7-inch machine. So it's making 2 7-inch records per cycle.
You've got a 7-inch machine up and running?
Yeah, finally. Yeah.
When I came sniffing around TKO during the genesis of Shiners Club, that was not true.
No, we got a machine, and it took close to 4 years to track down all the different parts and get it up and running. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. It's this model, the SMT 3600, which is dates from sort of the peak of Motown and jukebox 45s. Okay. And it was definitely designed to be a high output, high capacity machine for 45s. I mean, just the story of that machine alone is crazy. I don't know how much we talk about it, but it's the 3600 that we have has a long storied history. We got it out of Florida, where originally it had belonged to the reggae producer Joe Gibbs.
All right.
Who, I don't know how much you're into reggae, but he I mean, one of the big songs he produced was Blood and Fire by 90 The Observer. That's a reggae staple, and he's done many other ones.
Boast far more varied tastes than I am, sir.
Wow.
But thank you for exposing that.
No, that all goes back to the whole punk traditionalist thing. Acolytes of the Clash and Stiff Little Fingers. I mean, having a knowledge of reggae is required.
Absolutely.
But this machine was owned by Joe Gibbs, who I think supposedly had to leave the country because the FBI were after him for bootlegging Charlie Pride records. And so Joe Gibbs sold it to another reggae great, Cox and Dodd, who's the founder of Studio One. I mean, he's definitely, I've said, if there was a Mount Rushmore of reggae, he'd be on it. So, and then Cox and Dodd, ran that at his plant out of Florida until he passed away. So, we're in possession of this record that's made, millions of these classic reggae and soul.
Fantastic.
45s. Yeah, it's really kind of a neat legacy, and just some reggae vinyl collectors that I've told the history of the machine. Their jaws are on the floor, like, oh, can I come by? Can I touch it? So that's the neat part of this, is that all this old gear and all these old engineers we have to talk to. I mean, we're really for a music lover who's really into the deep nerd shit. Mm-hmm. This has been a delight.
I bet. I have practical questions for you.
Sure.
You come from a very specific background. How much are you able to service the world that you come from with the plant? In other words, how much of the records you end up pressing, not the label, the pressing plant, do you end up dealing with people whose music you love, or with labels who you admire, and how much of it is a business?
I would say a majority of we're really fortunate. The majority of it is stuff that if I'm not already a fan, mm-hmm. I at least feel a kinship to. We deal with overwhelmingly independent artists. We maybe do 1 or 2 major label titles a year, and even those ones that we do they're usually because of a personal connection that comes from the underground.
Okay.
But no, we've been very, very fortunate. I mean, there really hasn't been that much stuff that made me question my morals. Thankfully, we've managed to stay away from that. I mean, it does mean we have to hustle a lot harder. We're doing like a whole lot more of smaller jobs, But I think that my connections and growing up in punk and hardcore really aided me, and not just having a Rolodex of people to call up and go, hey, guess what? I'm pressing records now, but just in how to talk to the customers. I mean, we can relate to the customer because we've been in the customer's shoes.
Right.
Myself and I mean everybody in the building here. All of us are new to plastics manufacturing.
Okay.
But also all of us have been doing the music thing music side for
Right.
decades.
Been coming at it from a different angle.
For sure, whether band, label, both, what have you.
You and I have gone long, which I'm kind of proud of for the first time in weeks. I've just had a conversation. No. I still have a point I want to bring up with you.
Sure.
But I was going to say it's always interesting. I don't know if you've seen. I did an interview with Alexia Exarchos recently. She's an epidemiologist, and I was lucky enough to know someone in that field during quarantine. Right.
That's okay. Yeah, that's probably the one episode I haven't seen. But yeah,
where I'm tying this in is I should have let that one go longer. Talk about an opportunity where worrying about the length of the interview was just dumb.
Oh, for sure. That's probably exactly who you want to get more info from.
It's a great episode, and I should have just talked.
Have her back for a part 2.
Almost everybody. I hope I'm doing this for a long time, and almost everybody I've interviewed, I really hope I do a second and a third with. Current company included. My pragmatic question for you was, vinyl had a resurgence. Vinyl came back. It shocks what they would call, normcore or the general public that it's so popular and that it's been so in demand, in the last decade. Record Store Day had a big thing to do with that, big part to do with that. You're somebody who has witnessed several swings in terms of demand in the music market. Do you worry about long-term sustainability? What if the world swings away from vinyl again?
I mean, that's not what I'm worried about. I'm more worried about just the international situation and what that might do to international trade and in my supply chain.
Wow. Go with that.
Because right. I mean, right now, all of our PVC compound comes from Thailand, so I mean, it's really that's really what I find myself worrying about. It's more just access to the materials. We've just seen the demand go up and up and up, and it's just continuing. I mean, it's there's been a few reports of, oh yeah, the vinyl boom's over. It's it's dead or whatever, and then the numbers keep just busting through the ceiling. So I think that the format's back, it's reestablished. It's it's one thing that's important to point out is that you don't want to look at it as it's not mass media. This is a specialty piece now.
Absolutely.
And it's not, it's gone are the days where, I'm sure you remember where you could go in and get a new LP for under $10. I mean, you've now got, it's a premium product. You've got people willing to come in and pay $35, $45 for, a new record.
Good Lord.
It seems crazy to me, but, again, going back to the days of the record store, I mean, I in Fountain Valley, I remember when we started having a hard time finding used copies of all like the dad rock stuff, like the Eagles and et cetera, and all the stuff that you just took for granted that you thought you'd always be able to find. And so one time as an experiment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to wholesale and purchase a new copy of Hotel California, and let's just see what happens. And, it arrived and I had to, with my markup, I had to put it out like for close to $40. It didn't stay in the store. It didn't last 24 hours. It was gone. And so at that point, did I lose audio on you? You can hear me okay? Yeah. So at that point, it was sort of like, who am I to
soaking up your story, sir?
Well, just who am I to question if people are, if that's what they're willing to pay?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we to argue? And then the question becomes, okay, so now it's on us to, if we're fortunate enough to be dealing in a format where people are willing to pay this, premium price, it's on us to deliver quality. Right. That means no slouching, no bullshit packaging. It's got to look good. It's got to sound good. You don't, the last thing that you want to kill this vinyl trend, start having people pay $40 for bullshit.
Okay.
That'll end it really quickly.
I like that.
And I mean, that's the tack we take with our customers, and with on the pressing side with the service that we offer is we really try to model ourselves after, the audiophile plants of the 70s, where it's all about the quality, because we can't be the biggest, we can't be the cheapest. I mean, we've got 7 presses. There's other presses out there that have like 50 30, 50 presses. I mean, we're completely dwarfed on an industrial scale. But where we can compete is the quality.
Standing.
And so yeah, that's really, I mean, that's our philosophy really with what we try to offer to the people we work with.
I take that as my out, sir.
Okay.
No, and I'm going to tell you why. We ain't the biggest, we're the best. You're damn straight. I've got to tell you, I was blown away when I heard you were doing this. I was not jaded because you're somebody who actualizes their ambitions. So I wasn't skeptical that it would succeed, but I was like, how is this fucker going to pull this off? And I'm glad we had an opportunity to sit down today and I could find out a little more of the truth about that. I wish you nothing but the best in it. Anytime you want to rattle your sword about something that's going on in music, please reach out and we'll find time on the show.
Oh, I'd love to. I mean, there's all sorts of directions we could spiral off, and talking about the political climate up here in the Pacific Northwest, talking about how how building a factory with my friends and trying to industrially manufacture this product has pushed me so far to the left politically that I never would have expected it.
Now you're talking my language. You just cemented Mark Rainey episode 2, sir.
Yes. All right. We'll count on it, man. Anytime you want, I can blather on about this stuff for hours and hours.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and still record. And that was Mark Rainey, Cascade Record Pressing.
Thanks, Dan.